All right, so today is the 10th of the month, right? So this will be our probably I think our second lecture in 3D Studio Max, right? So a few things that we need to work out first. Let me first share my screen here. So here we have our 3D Max, right? And last week, I always like to do a recap in the video of everything that we covered in the last class. So last class, we covered, the basic interface for 3D Studio Max. I didn't really assign, the only homework that I assigned was just to practice everything I did on the video, right? You weren't making any renderings just yet because we haven't learned how to render yet. We'll cover those things today. So from today's class, you'll be able to start documenting all the work that you create in 3D Max, right? And we can start to look at it every class, because every class I like to look at your renderings, just go through them briefly, and we can see everyone's level, and we can start to spot any problems you guys might have, and we can try to address them, during the class. So that's the main thing that we'll try and do here. In school, you guys will be using, of course, 3D Max. I'm using 2023, and it looks like I think we finally got the license to work because V-Ray, like I mentioned, it doesn't come with 3D Max. It's a third-party plugin that's a very good plugin. It's used throughout the entire world. It's renowned for the best quality renderings, but again, it's not free, right? So so I think we got it working now again, and I'll put a file in your Dropbox that includes how to get it and the login to use for for this account, right? So I'll put everything to a Word file and drop it into there, but we'll go over it in detail so you guys can see exactly what's happening there. Let me see if I can show it to you guys here. Make sure everything's clear when you guys go to install your V-Ray. Second. Okay, so I'm gonna drop this file, if you guys can see it, into your class folder after class today. Let's see if you guys can see it here better. So what this is, it's an account for V-Ray. So through the school, we have an account for V-Ray that covers pretty much every program that will use V-Ray. So it means that this account can be used for V-Ray in Rhino, 3D Max, and a bunch of other softwares. The key thing here is, you guys to just follow the steps. First, step one, go to this link and download the V-Ray, right? Then you go into install it, right? Then you have to sign in using, this here. So it's student.arch.nyct.gmail, right? And this is the password for the account. And we are all sharing the exact same password. So again, this is just your login and password. Do not go into the account and change anything, because that will mess up for the entire everyone with this license, right? Because this is it's called a floating license. That means that we have the same account for everyone using it at the same time. So and then again, just download V-Ray version, right? Everything, just click in the link here, sign in, right? And then you can launch your 3D Max, and we'll go over those steps now and see how they work when we get to that point. So again, I'll put this file in your Dropbox, and then you'll be able to have those things ready. All right, so last week, we really covered only the interface of 3D Max and a few other things, right? We kind of know what, where things are located now. We have the viewports, we have, the top right option that we have the properties, the primitives and such things. So we made a few boxes last week. We tried to modify the boxes. We played with the snaps, rotation, scale, move, all those things that are pretty useful in 3D Max. I believe we didn't see this part over here, right? If you open 3D Max for the first time, you should have this kind of bar on the left side here. So this bar controls multiple things. It could be used as a thing for layers, right? It could be used to turn off certain elements from the entire scene. Just like a button here for primitives, for 2D elements, for lights, for camera. So you can simply just go here and you see listed here all the lights that are in your space, right? So for example, if I go here and I make a box, right? You see with the box here, it now appears here. This is box 001. And we can see that we can actually do a few things to this box, right? Let me just make this bigger. If I make another box here, or a third box, you see that it keeps showing here, box 1, box 2, box 3. So, we can, this little I button here, this I button is pretty universal. It'll be the same thing in, I think, almost any software. And we can hide some things from view through here. There's also here the little, looks like a snowflake. That's the frozen tab. So when anything gets frozen, it doesn't matter if it has materials, color, it will always look gray. So let's say here, this is, we have 3 different colors. When I freeze each one, they now become, gray. And why do we use freeze? You guys tell me. Why is it useful for us? What's the point of using freeze?
So the object doesn't move, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, let me put here a new box over here, right? This box is not frozen. If I want to move these boxes, I go here to move. I can't do anything, I can select this blue box because it's not frozen. But these boxes, it could be for safety, maybe you want to make sure that you don't move this box by mistake, so you can freeze it. And again, you can see it there. You can tell it's frozen because it turns gray. And when you're done, you can go back here and simply, uncheck the frozen tab. But one thing you will see here is that you really don't have a layer structure. It's just listing everything in the same order, right? But again, for us, we are used to working with layers, whether it's an AutoCAD or Rhino or maybe, Photoshop. Layers are important because we can assign layers to different elements, right? It could be the floors, the walls, the furniture, the windows. It makes it easy to select elements and either to freeze them, or maybe even to apply materials. So if you look down here at the bottom left where it says default, right? At this point, we haven't assigned what this bar should do. So if you click on the little arrow here, we have different options. For us, the best one is the one called Layer Explorer. So I'm going to click on this one called Layer Explorer. And now you see that this changed to a different profile. We still have this bar over here, but now we have a default layer. And again, when you open any software, there always going to be a layer 0, which is your default layer, and everything you create will be assigned to that layer. So for example, now, if I open up this layer, we have their box, 1 through 4. If I make more shapes, let's say, I go here and make a sphere, right? Let's say I make a cone, right? Those elements are right now being made under that box, right? Because it's my current default layer. Right? So if you want to make more layers, and eventually you should, it's really, you just gotta, put your mouse over this gray area, right click it, and look for the create layer. So here we got create layer. So let's say, and then I'm gonna double click it to change the name. And the double clicking works sometimes, if you double click here, see I'm doing it a couple of times, it's not really working that well. So in case, you can just right click it and find the rename here. And let's say I'm gonna call this one, let's call it the boxes. Let's make a couple layers. Let's make the next one, new layer. Create layer. I'm gonna call this layer sphere. Spheres, okay. So now we have 3 layers. We have the default layer, we have the boxes layer, and these spheres. How do you tell which layer is current? Can you guys make it out?
I'm assuming it's the one highlighted in blue.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So right now it might be hard to see, but you see these 3 elements here. It looks like 3 planes. Right now that one's looking blue. So that means that if I go here, let's say I make another box, there's a box that's being added to that layer. Right? If I go here and I click on the boxes, now that part is blue. So now let's say I make a new box. Let's make 2 more boxes, 3 boxes, right? Let's open up here. They're now showing up here, right? Again, if I click sphere and I start making a bunch of other sphere like this, I just made 3 spheres. They're being shown under here, right? All right, but next thing, okay, so we have now, how about this sphere here? This sphere is in the wrong layer. It's in the default 0 layer. How can we move it to the other side? And again, just always assume it's the same way as in Rhino or maybe AutoCAD or maybe other softwares. and just to make it easier. So if you had to guess, you know, how can I get this sphere to this layer?
Just drag
Just
the,
drag it.
Yeah, pretty much, you know. So I can take the sphere, drag it out, right? And drop it here. Oops. There we go. And when you drag it out, so I can see, like if we have here the cone, if I drag it here, right? It's not working right. You have to drag it out to the blue element, right? In this case, the layer, and then it's going to add it. So now we have the cone, and now we have 3 layers. So I can add at any time, you know, I can, you know, simplify the structure, and I can just hide the entire layer. I can hide all the boxes. I can hide all the spheres, you know, fairly easily, or I can just, you know, do any of those things. So this is, for me, this is not so much for like hiding things. It's just to be able to organize things, you know, properly, you know, throughout here. And then we go into more detail as we go, you know, in the class. But that's the first thing that I think we will do here. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. I always like to, when I start 3D Max, I like to always go to customize, go to unit setup, and just make sure that I'm working in the correct units. This really shouldn't change. You know, I've seen it a couple of times, it resets, but just make sure everything is feet and inches, and before you start modeling anything more, you know, in the scene. All right, so let's see what we have here. So today's class, you know, I really want to focus a bit more detail on, let's see, I'm starting to render stuff here. So that means that we're gonna make, you know, some type of scene here that eventually we're gonna use for testing out, you know, materials and shadows and such things. But today, you know, I want to just kind of try different shapes, right? I want to explore a bit more detail how to make these shapes be more precise, right? So let me start here by making a platform. So I'm gonna make a box like this, you know, and, you know, let's figure out the size of this box. Right now, you know, it's huge. So let's make it be, so we all have the same thing, 50 feet, make it 50 by 50. So there's my 50 by 50 box. And then the height, we're gonna go into the negative value because you wanna go below the 0,0 axis. So if I move this box, let's say from here, you see how there's my grid. So if I pick the box, right, and go to properties and I extrude it or height, you know, in the positive, you know, see that now we can't see the grid, right? Because we're going above our 0,0. So I'm gonna go here and do -1 foot. So you see there's my grid. So that means that now the top of the box is at the same level as my ground plane, so that I can always check it for any other things I create here. All right, so there's my box, right? So let's make, you know, let's look at making maybe a more complex shape, something that we did before in class. And then we can use that shape to, you know, practice a few things. So let's make a box here. All right, again, let's try to make it precise here. So let's make this box be 10 feet. 10 feet by, let's see, 15 feet. Oops. 15 feet. And let's make it also 15 high. So it'll be 10 in length, 15 in width, and height also 15, something like this, right? And I might have to make this thing bigger later, but you know, that'll be easier to change. All right, so let's look at this here. And so if I go to F3, we can see that this is a very simple box. There's no other geometry. But let's say I want to make something more complex, right? So I really want to make it look more interesting. And a lot of things we can do here. First of all, in this view, when I start going into something that is like this, when I want to rotate, I like to switch my view here from perspective to orthographic. It just works a little better with the zoom. Also, now we see the whole grid, so I can just, I'm gonna hit G to turn the grid off right now. All right, and the idea is to take this shape, you know, make it more complex, right? So first of all, let's do F3. Again, guys, if I'm going too fast or you get confused, please stop me, right? Don't let me just go on if you guys have a question. All right, so there's the box. Let's add a few more segments. Let's put 4 segments like that. 4 and 4. So now we have, a more complex box, right? And now how can I start to select those individual segments and start to like pull them or stretch them? What did we cover last week?
I think you were supposed to pick a face and then like you were pulling it and pushing it in.
Yes, exactly. But before we get to that face part, we need to first explode it so we can access because right now this box, if I click on the box here, it's linked to different parameters. So these three things, length, width, height, are linked to just this bar here. Same thing with the segments. So again, we want to break that. So this way we lose access to those points. So just select the box, right click it, and we do convert to editable mesh, which is pretty much the same thing as explode if you use AutoCAD or maybe Rhino. So we do convert to editable mesh. So now when that happens, then we lose access now to the length, the width, or the segments. All we have is access to elements. So we can do, select the points. So we can see here all the points through here. So I can, pick this point if I want to, pull it out there, pick this one here, pull it out. Really any place I want to. And I want to make it this thing more, and then I can also go here to the one called polygon, and I can do a few things here. I can pick a few polygons, and I'm doing the control to select multiple things. I can push it inward, I can push it out like this, not a big deal. I can take a couple random ones here, push them in like this. Just be careful. You see that if I push too much, look what's happening here, right? This starts to look black. So why do you think this looks like this? Or what are you trying to prevent from doing? So watch what happens when I move less, right? Eventually stop. So when you see something black like this, it means your geometry is now superimposed over the other geometry. So I mean, there's two of them in the same place. And when that happens, it starts to cause problems. So just be careful, don't go too far, because it starts to mess up the space. I can pick, I can do multiple things. I can pick this whole corner, then I can just pull it out here. And I'm doing this because I want to do something more precise afterwards. Okay, I can take this corner, bring it down like this. Take these two. Again, try to make something abstract here. Take these. I can also go here and just do segments or the edge, right? And you see the edge covers those lines. So I can do multiple edges at the same time. I just pull them out. And sometimes, when you look at this view like this, when it looks like a shaded view, it's hard to really see it because it's not really too precise. But when you do F3 and you look at the geometry, then I think you start to see better what this shape actually is looking like. And we can start to really see how we're pulling, the shape, the geometry to create, our element here. And again, this is also a good way to, if you're working maybe in a design class and you have to design, a massing model, this is a great way to start visualizing your space, So again, just try to create something, abstract like this. And then, we'll go and explore, So that looks to me pretty interesting. So we'll leave it there. Also check here, like if I go too far, then you don't pull it too much, right? So we have this kind of looking, shape here. So again, this shape right now is lacking something, right? What is it lacking? So it's lacking like a precise form, right? I can pull this thing also up like this, doesn't really matter. I create like an entrance. So this preview here is not that precise, right? If you do F3, yeah, we can see the individual, faces or geometry. The shadows, like here, look at this part here. This thing's coming out at an angle. When you do F3 again, you can barely see it, it's just, there's no definition, right? So to get this shape to be more defined, we're going to be working with modifiers. So pretty much in 3D Max, you can apply a modifier to almost any object, right? So, you know, in this most simplest way, let's say that we take a box, right? I make a box over here. Right? I select the box and I go to properties, right? So, you know, it's a box, there's the name, right? It's called box 003. But you see here behind that modifier list, if you drop this menu down, these are all options for modifiers that we could apply to this box to achieve different things. So let's say, for example, I go here and I apply a, let's see, something that's visually, yes. Here, let's apply a twist modifier. So you see, now I put a twist here. We can define the angle. And we can kind of twist this box like this, you know, to create, you know, something else. And again, this modifier is not it's not really deforming the shape. It's a modifier. So at any time I can just turn it off, right? And you can, you know, bring it, or you can just delete it, right? And that's it, right? I can also apply multiple modifiers at the same time. So let's say I go here and apply twists, right? And then maybe I go here and I apply a different one. Let's see what we have here. Let's say we apply squeeze, right? So I'm going to squeeze this object now, and we can define, you know, how far to squeeze it, how to squeeze it, you know, top or the bottom of the shape, the curve here, and you can put some limits. So you can, again, take this shape, right? But again, the key thing here is that this shape is not defined yet, right? This shape, you know, right now works on these two modifiers. So at any time I can turn them off and it goes back to being a box. If you want to keep this shape like this because, I don't know, you like it, and then you want to be able to just maybe take this corner and pull it, you follow the same steps before. You know, you select the shape, you right click it, and you do convert to editable mesh. So now that shape is now defined, you know. And if you do F3, then that's your, you know, geometry for this shape, right? So this shape, you know, once you explode it, you know, if I click it again, all we have here is the vertex, the faces. We can no longer play with that twist bar or the squeezer. Those things are now gone. So again, only do that when you're satisfied with the shape and you feel that you need to add more detail that you can get from, you know, those elements. All right. So let's take these two shapes here, and I'm gonna copy them. Let's put him here. And I'll do an exact copy. So in this case, copy the top one. And let's see what else we can do with modifiers. So let's look at this shape over here. So this is our copy. Let's make it be more precise. So let's select the shape, go here to properties, and go to modifier list. And let's apply a, let's see here. Here, it's called mesh smooth. So this is going to define the mesh to be more precise. It's going to make it smoother. So again, apply mesh smooth and see what happens. You see what happened to the shapes? Is it really good? Not there yet. You know, it's looking okay. But you know, it's still not very smooth, right? So that means we have to apply a second modifier in this to get it to be really, to look like a blob, I guess. So let's go back here again and keep going down. And this time we'll apply a smooth modifier. It just simply is smooth. So apply that again. Okay. And we get a few other things here. So you see the options here. Again, this looks a little better. You know, there's more definition with the geometry. Let's see, we can do here, right? You see this here, the smoothing groups. The higher you go, doesn't really mean it's going to be more precise, right? See, I'm clicking a bunch of different things here. Let's say if I put 5, I put 14, 20, doesn't really change too much, right? So let me do it again because so let me just delete this here. And let's do it. Let me actually copy it one more time here, even though it's past my thing here. All right, so let's take, this is our original element. This one here, let's try to apply just a smoothing modifier, so smooth, right? That will give me this, right? So with that, you know, defined here, if I do F3, right? you see that we have here geometry, right? But right now, when I do again F3, it's not really defined. When I apply a smoothing modifier to this one, then it defines the geometry to what it should be, the same thing as the wireframe. And we can now see exactly, what this shape looks like here. We could go here, and play again one. Oops. So again, if we don't use anything here, we get just the actual geometry, which now could be a more interesting looking, let's say, building or structure. If I start to add any of those smoothing groups, let's say, or the key thing here is you can also do auto smooth, right? Like this. So auto smooth, will make us lose, the shape like this, right? Let's do the one here also. Let's do the same thing. Select it, right? I'm gonna apply smooth down here. I'll do auto smooth, right, for that one. And then I'm gonna apply a second one, the one called mesh smooth. All right, then we have this. And look at the settings that we have here, right? So again, max, I know it seems complex because whatever you choose here, there's a ton of options here. Look how many things we can select here. But again, let's look only at the things that really matter for us. So when you apply mesh smooth here, the first thing you might see is that it doesn't really look that smooth, right? It's kind of, a little bit of, some jagged edges there. There's some weird shadows there. So the thing is, look at this part here, the one that says subdivision amount, right? Right now, the amount is 1, so 1 iteration. And do not go here and put like, 200, always go by ones, because this is makes a dramatic change. And if you put it too high, it could definitely crash your computer. So let's leave it there. So let's try 2, see what happens. Much better, right? So this smoother out here, right? Let's try 3. Much, much better, right? Let's try 4. A little better. 5. At this point, pretty much once you hit 4, that's your limit. You could go higher and higher, but it's not gonna make a big difference. But you can see what's happening here, right? Look, you see the curves here. If I go here, let's say back to 1, back to 2, it starts to smooth out all those curves. 3. So for me, I think 3 is a good number. And you see now how this looks, everything's nice. It almost looks like a, I don't know, like what, like a piece of clay, right? Let's say. And now we can take our model, these 3 models, and look how different they are, right? We can go from basic geometry to a defined geometry to a smooth geometry and create 3 different massing models of our building if we have to. If we go to this shape over here, the same thing. Let's take this shape here. Select this one here, and let's first apply smooth, right? You see that geometry, how it looks, so now we can actually do a lot of things with this. Okay, so now let's take this and copy it again. Let's go to copy. And now this one, I'm going to apply a second modifier, which is going to be the mesh smooth. Let's see, where is this? Here. And let's do again, let's do again 3 iterations. We get this, right? So right now, how do you guys see this? Do you see it as helpful or potentially used in one of your classes? No, yes. What do you
Yeah,
guys
I
think?
think definitely for like design classes, this would be like a helpful tool.
Good. Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, in the early stages, right, of this. And again, I'm trying to teach this by also, at the same time, it could be useful, and you can learn about kind of some of the key modifiers that we have in, in 3D Max. All right. So let's see what else we can do through a modifier. So let's say, I need to extract, I don't know, structure, right, for this. Maybe for this one over here, or for this, these 2. So I'm going to take these 2 and let's copy them again as a copy, right? So now from these 2, I want to extract structure, or I want to extract the exoskeleton from these things. So again, there's also a modifier for this. So if I pick this object here, select it, go to the properties, and now we have here, go back to modifier list. We're going to apply a modifier called lattice. So lattice will extract the geometry and we can make the geometry into a thickness. So let's go, I'm gonna apply lattice, right? First of all, this is my default setting, right, for the lattice work. And then if you go to the properties, we can see that we can start to control the rest. So let's go here very close, right? So we have here the struts. So the struts right now, it's a radius of 2 inches. And if we make it bigger, the struts are those little, sticks here. We can make it bigger or smaller. So let's say we keep them as, 2 inches, right, for example. Then we have the segments, right? And we have the sides. So right now, these struts have 4 sides, which means that it's pretty much a extruded square. If we start to add more sides and more sides, eventually it becomes what? Something cylindrical, right? So we can make it a more tube-like structure, right? And then we have these things between the struts, or these at every connection, these are called the joints. So these joints, we can, let's find one here. Yes, there's 3 options. You can do a tetra like this, an octa, and icosa. They're different shapes, right? And with these things, you can again play with the radius. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller so you don't see them. You can add segments, right? More segments means it's gonna look eventually more cylindrical in shape. You can apply smooth, right? So it looks very smooth there. Same thing with the struts. If you apply smooth, right? Now it looks like a really nice, clean model here, right? And this model could now technically be added to this one. So let's say I take this model and I give it a color. Let's just go here and make it red. I could take this one and now superimpose it over my building, right, that I just made before. And now I just have a very nice structure, right, applied to this, right? Whether it's complex or not, at least now, you created shape, you created massing, and you created some idea of structure. Even this one here, which is more complex, right? Let's try it, right? Select it. Let's apply again, so go to select, go back to modifier list, and we're gonna apply lattice. So this one, it's a bit more complex because this shape being organic, it creates more segments. But again, just by the default, it actually looks pretty interesting. What does this look like actually? It could be, yeah, it could be some type of facade, right? Yeah. The size of that a little big, so we do have to go here. Let's say it looks like the joints are pretty large here, so let's try here point, like an 1/8 inch smaller. So let's try smaller here. So see, here is hard to control because they're so big. So let's try point, I don't know, 0.005. Not too much. So we can't really go more lower than this. So right now my limit here is so I'm already kind of at 0, so I really can't go any smaller. We can try and let's go here to customize unit setup. And you see my units here are limited to 1/32. So I'm gonna go here and make it, let's try 1/64. Is that gonna make a difference here? Let's see here. No, I mean, you really cannot go further than that. You do create something that looks kind of interesting, right? We can go here and make the struts a little smaller. So right now they're 2 inches, it's making 0.5 inches. There we go. So when you lower the struts, things get a little smaller, right? Again, we can, if you want to give it more sides or more segments. Again, don't make it too much because, this is a very complex shape. Look how complex this is, right? So again, now we have a kind of a nice looking exoskeleton for this. We can try this thing. And again, in this case, I don't want to see, this large sphere here. So this could be 0, right? And we only care about this kind of large looking kind of structural element to here. So again, we can select it. We can go to the top right. Let's give it a color, make it orange. We can select it. And we can combine it, we can leave it by itself. So a lot of things we can do here with these shapes. So that's kind of another key thing is how to take whatever you create and be able to modify it, whether it's organic shapes or more defined, geometries. It's a good way to start to to create these elements. All right, let me make this base here a little bigger. So before it was 50 by 50, let's make it 150 by 150. And don't forget the foot mark. All right, there's my base. So now that we have this, we have something to render, right? Because before, there's nothing to actually capture, our views here. All right, so let's see, how do we render here? So I think the next topic here is what are we going to use to render? How do we capture it? How do we save it, right? And how everything works. So the way that you capture here, first of all, we need to set up a rendering engine, right? So once you install 3D Max, then you install V-Ray, right? You're gonna relaunch 3D Max, right? And we're gonna click on this button over here. It looks like a teapot with a little wheel. So it's called Render Setup. In case, you can always hit F10. And when you click that, we're gonna get, again, this thing. Again, this looks like it's tons of stuff, right? If you look through here, there's so many settings, this is why it's V-Ray is good, and why, it seems a bit intimidating. But let's go here, step by step. And again, the things that we don't need, I'm going to just ignore. The first thing is this one here, renderer. Once you installed V-Ray, you should be able to go here and select V-Ray 6 Hotfix 3, right? Yours might be maybe more recent than mine, but the same thing. The main thing is that the second V-Ray here called V-Ray GPU, that one we're not going to use. This one relies on the graphics cards and tends to work really slow. So we're gonna focus on just V-Ray, just simply the one that says V-Ray. So select it, right? Let it go there, okay. And then, we'll go through, first of all, let's go through each tab. This one will come back. This is just the common tab. The key tab is the one called V-Ray. You see, when I click here, I have access to all these buttons here. If you happen to click here, right, and this screen looks blank, right, there's nothing here, it means that you probably installed V-Ray, but it hasn't been activated. So let's say that you click on V-Ray, everything's blank. What do, right? You go here to settings, right? You go here to the first tab that says authorization, right? And then you see here where it says manage chaos license. You just click here, it's gonna bring you over to a website, which is, and you see right now I'm logged in with the same account, the student arch NYCCT. And if you weren't logged in, it'll say please log in. So just input your credentials, log in, and then close Max, open it again, and this should be working. So in case, give that a try when you guys install it. All right, so now let's look at this thing here. So let's look at each tab here. And again, you might not be able to see everything at once depending on the size of your computer or the computer screen, but let's look at the key things here. So the first tab here is the, it's, what are you going to render? A rendering or an animation? Because you can do a single rendering or you can do a sequence, right? So sequence is more for movies, right? So we're not gonna do that. So for us, it will always be single, right? The area to render should always be view, right? Because you want to render the whole view that you currently see. The next one here defines the size of your rendering, right? So for this, let's use, and again, you see, if you go here, you can choose a lot of presets to match actual cameras, whether it's a TV camera, movie camera, or like an actual physical, maybe like a Canon camera. But for us, we're gonna use the one called Vista Vision. And with that, there's 4 settings here. So 4 different qualities. We're gonna pick the second size. So the one called 1024 by 683. That's a good size to start. Okay. The next here is something that, I, for now, ignore it. We're not gonna do anything here. And same thing down there. For now, these are the only key things for us to work on. So keep in mind that important thing is this should be single, right? This should be view. We're gonna use Vista Vision. And don't forget to pick the second choice here, which is 1024 by 683. And for now, that's it, On the next tab, for now, nothing here, leave that as it is. The key tab for us is the one called GI. Anyone know what GI stands for? Take a guess. No one knows, yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
So what does GI stand for? Just taking a guess. Maybe you guys know.
Graphic interface?
Okay, that's yeah. It's called not that, but you know, it's also a good guess. It's called global illumination, right? So this is the key thing for V-Ray, because V-Ray works on ray tracing. So for this, you know, this is what makes the rendering appear realistic. So we have two rendering engines here. So let's modify things. Right now, the default settings tend to be really, really high, which make things take forever to render. And actually, you know, it's not a big difference between this is what I'm going to give you guys. So the primary engine, we're going to change from brute force to irradiance map. Secondary, we'll keep it as light cache. That's fine. And now let's modify each of these ones. So the first one here is the irradiance map. By default, is set to high. So we're going to make it very low. That's more than enough even for final quality renderings. Then we're going to go to light cache, and we're going to modify one setting here, which is the subdivisions here. So right now, by default, is 1000. So the subdivisions, what they do is the more you have, the more precise your light is going to be. Especially, you know, if imagine you're, you know, in a room, right? You know, if you have a window, then things are very precise. But once you go things like in the corner, you know, then it starts to get a little darker. There's more shadow, more shade. So the higher you go here, the more precise it's gonna pick up those elements. It doesn't mean you want to make this super high. You know, 1000, maybe, you know, 1400 is a good number, but I really wouldn't go any higher. And also, this number would be high if you're doing something like an interior rendering, because it's less light. Once you're outside, there's more light. You know, it's the sun. So we can start by dropping this to 500, which still makes a very nice looking rendering. And for now, those are the key settings to have, you know, here. Other ones here, settings, these don't really, you know, matter really for us too much. No, not at all, yes. Only the one here to manage, you know, if you have to, you know, sign in, render elements we're not going to use. Yeah, so for now, leave that like that. So that's set up now to the rendering. So now the next thing, so once we set up our rendering engine, what is the next thing that we need to be able to render? Think about how do you capture something? What do you need?
Camera.
Yes, so we need a camera. So the cameras here work really well. They're really, I think, easy to use. And, you know, to me, you know, compared to Rhino, because Rhino cameras to me are really confusing and I never get the hang of how they work. So if you go back here to the plus sign, which gives you access to these categories, we have here the camera icon. So just click on camera. We're going to use a physical camera. So let me put it here so you guys can see better. I'm going to click on physical and then just click and drag it out like this. Doesn't matter which way you're facing, but you know, like this. That's my camera, right? And you know, you recognize that it looks like a camera, right? We have this part over here, which is the main camera. And then we have this here, which is the, you know, let's call it the target, right? And again, we can click the target. We can move it, you know, left and right. We can click the camera base, move it again, left and right like this, no problems. So that's easy to use, right? If I click on the camera and go to the properties of this camera, there's a lot of settings, like ton of settings. But again, we don't need all these settings because these settings are made for people that are trying to match their camera to their own physical camera. So imagine you have a professional photographer that he's got a, you know, a Canon camera, you know, with a certain lens or a certain film, right? You can go here, you can edit all this to capture exactly key settings, right? So let's say the f-stop on the camera, the focal length, the you know, the film, you know, whether it's 35 millimeter, all these things can be used there to capture exactly what he has in real life. For us, you know, we don't really care about those settings. The only setting that I like here is maybe controlling the camera lens so we can see more or less. But before we modify it, you know, let's take this camera here and move it into place. So we have it here. I'm gonna put it here. You know, try to point it to my scene like this. And now let's see here. So I'm gonna make my bottom right view my camera view. So I'm gonna click here where we have orthographic, right? And you see my first tab here, camera. Now we have our first camera shown here. There's no limit here. You can have 10 cameras, 20 cameras. They will all be shown here. And right now, it has a default name, which is called physical camera 001. Eventually, we'll give them names, right? This way, they become easier to find. But let's click here on our first camera. Okay. So the first view here, this part looks black. Why do you think that happens? Let's look at the camera. So when you insert any object into 3D Max, where is that object gets inserted to? You look at the camera, right? So the object is always at the 0, 0, 0. So always at the same level as this plane, right? Which is the ground plane. So that means the camera now is halfway between the upper level and halfway between the, let's say underside. So let's take again, this camera. I could also go to this view, and I could technically move the front like this, right? But for now, let me do Control C. I want to move the camera up and down at the same level. So parallel to the ground. So I'm going to pick the front of the camera, pick also the back at the same time, just move it up. So now we can see, get a more detail into what's happening here. All right, that's the second thing. We have our camera in our scene. The next thing here is once you put your camera in your scene, the key thing is this viewport here that we see, right, for our camera. If we go here and we move the camera to any location, we can see exactly what's happening, there, right? The thing is, this view is not really precise just yet. So this view that you have here is not the actual view that's going to render. Why? Because, this viewports, you can modify them, right? I can make them like this. So now this is a very kind of a panoramic looking view. I can make the viewport, again, smaller, I can always move this viewport to, like this. So now it looks like a portrait mode, right? And it's not, right? The camera's got a defined setting. So how do you see? So ideally, what I want to see here is I want to see the exact proportion of what I'm going to render. This way I can move the camera precisely and capture whatever I want to see. Right now here, I'm guessing what I see and what I might not see. So the next thing, once you put your camera, is go to the first tab here, scroll down, and then add the one called Show Save Frame. So Save Frame is going to add a yellow border, right? You see now we have some black areas here and here. Those black areas means that you can't see them and you won't render them. So the only thing that will render will be everything that's shown here. So even if you make this viewport bigger, we have the same proportion. Even if I make it, let's say, very small, same proportions there. So you can always tell exactly what the final view is going to look like. And that's key if you really want to define, boundaries with your shots. All right, that's the next thing that's important, right? It's having that part. So again, the next thing is, the lens, how much do I want to see, right? Because again, a lens can go from, something that is really zoomed in, something zoom out, something that is almost like a wide angle lens. Anyone know here, what is a very typical lens to use in architecture photography? And this question is becoming more difficult to answer only because everyone now works pretty much on their phones, right? I think almost no one has, really carries around those big cameras, with lenses that you can switch. But a typical lens, so no one has any guesses what it could be?
I'm going to say 35 millimeter, but
Okay. Yeah, not too far out, so a typical lens, something like a 24 millimeter, which a lens is made by a lot of companies. And this lens, it's a wide angle lens, but not extreme wide angle, because the thing is, when you go to an extreme wide angle lens, yes, you do see more stuff, but the things start to become deformed. So the shape no longer looks like the actual, building. So if I click here on my camera, let's go to the properties here. So the ones that I want is check here for lens, right? This is my lens tab. And my lens right now is 40 millimeters. So let's make it 24. You see that now I see much more in my shot here. I could go low, obviously, you can get lenses that are 8 millimeters, right? But now everything is really stretched and distorted, right? So 24 is a good size to use. You know, it's a good it's used by most photographers. You know, and it's used quite heavily in architecture photography. So 24 will give me a better view. Now we have the whole thing showing here. So at this point, you know, I have my subject. You know, I have my camera, and let's start to render and see what happens, right? So to render, we need this one here. It's a little teapot again with a little blue looking thunderbolt. So let's click here, see what happens. All right, so there's my first rendering. Everything looks black. Why do you think? What are we missing? You know, what do you guys think? No guesses? So why do you think everything's black?
No lights.
Yeah, so pretty much our scene needs key things to work, right? We need, you know, the elements, we need the camera, right? And for the camera to work, it needs lights, right? Whether, you know, so we have to add a sun to our scene. So let's put a sun next. Let's go to the top view here, right? And let's go here again to the plus sign. You see the little light bulb. Let's click on that. Then click on this little drop-down menu because we have different options for lights. We have photometric lights, we have light as standard, we have V-Ray light, and we have Arnold. So for now, we're gonna select the V-Ray. And then we have at the bottom right called V-Ray Sun. So let me step over here. I'm gonna click on V-Ray Sun. And again, just click it and drag it out like this. When you let go, this is gonna pop up. So this says, would you like to automatically add a V-Ray sky environment? This, you said yes. Because what this does, you know, so the sun creates a direct light. That means it's gonna create very nice looking shadows. The skylight creates ambient light. That's gonna make a nice overall light for the whole scene, right? And it's gonna make shadows that are very smooth. Imagine a cloudy day, right? So in this case, yes, for that. Okay, this changed, which is fine. The next thing here is look at the sun. Look at how it works, right? We have a little, again, square, you know, that's the target of the sun. We have the main sun, and you can tell because you have an arrow, right? And it's make sure the arrow is pointing, you know, to your scene, because many times I see you guys put the sun and it's looking like this. So, you know, it's definitely, if it's pointing away from the scene, you're not getting any light. Everything's still gonna look black. So, okay, so let's put the sun here. So let's say I want to get some shadow. So maybe let's put the sun behind the camera. So let's put it here. And I can look at this, you know, there's my camera, there's my subject. I'm looking, so if I go like this, I'm gonna get some shadows along here, which is good. All right, so there's my sun like that. One thing to keep in mind is if you move the sun very close here or very far, it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to change because whether you're close or far, you know, it's the same intensity. What really matters for the sun is the angle of the sun, right? All right, so right now this sun, if you look at it in our scene, where is it placed? It's again, like before, it's completely flat and parallel to the ground plane because everything that we add is always, you know, on the ground plane. So if we go now and make a rendering, first of all, we get a nice preview, right, of here, right? What do we see here in the background? Looks like a sunset. And that's because, you know, this sun reacts automatically to its angle, right? If it's flat like this, you know, parallel, then it's most likely, you know, is it a sunset or sunrise? We're a very low angle. As we start to move the sun higher in the sky gets brighter, right? Like a typical day, and we get more light. Also, the sun's intensity, as the angle changes, you know, whether it's higher or lower, is going to change automatically, right? Right now, the light is probably very low. If you make it higher, it's going to be much stronger. The color of the light will also change from becoming, let's say, very orange or red to more yellow, white, depending on the time of day. But for now, let's leave it there, you know, and not change anything yet. So let's leave it flat and see what happens to our preview. Let's go step by step. So let's go back to our viewport here and let's render again. Okay. So now we encounter the next problem here. We can definitely see everything, but what's wrong now? What are we lacking?
maybe like contrast.
Yes, contrast, and that's typically handled by which feature in your camera.
Maybe the lens effects.
It's which also controls, more important, the light balance, right? Your camera will do an automatic, it'll figure out if the scene is too dark, is it's too bright, and it will start to adjust the camera, for all these things that are, auto corrections. So here, because it's 3D Max, it relies on us telling it what to do. So right now, we have a sun, a camera, but we haven't told it how to interpret, too much light or too little light. So we have to now assign a light correction. So if you go here to rendering, we're gonna add an exposure control, right? So we have a correct exposure, and this will be something automatic. So click on exposure control, right? Go down to exposure control, and we're gonna change the setting from V-Ray. So make sure it says V-Ray exposure control. Then the next tab that opens here is called mode, right? We're gonna change this mode from V-Ray camera. So when you have those two settings changed, the computer will do an automatic exposure control. So let's close it up again. Let's click here again, and let's render again for the third time. And that's not bad. Our sun, like I said, is currently flat on the ground, which means that the sun is already kind of below the horizon. So really, we're not really getting shadows, which is fine. We are seeing a nice kind of sunset sky, almost like dusk. And let's now look at, what happens as we start to move the sun up in the sky. So where's my sun? Here's my sun over here. So let's move it a little higher, like this. You see, this already changed to, and again, don't rely on this viewport, it's not really accurate yet. Eventually, it's going to look just white. You do have to rely on just the rendering. So right now, we moved it a few degrees up. Let's look at how it changes here. So we see this part is getting a little bit, stronger, it's more orange. We're still not getting shadows because, again, the sun and the sunrise is not that strong. So as we go a little higher, the angle is getting higher in my sun. So now the sun is starting to create, it's very long shadow because it's early in the morning, right? So it's a very deep shadow. The lighting started to change, right? The sky looks less orange, we start to get some blues. We get some light peeking through here. Let's keep going a little higher. Let's go like this. Now the sun is a little higher, so our shadows are now a little bit smaller, right? Because the sun is now going higher in the sky. We get some better light. The sky is looking more blue, right? Here, some nice looking shadows there. You see also these two scenes, the background became white. That's kind of annoying because it's too strong. And again, if you work in 3D Max, you're spending a lot of time in the computer. So it's not good to have colors that are like white because it makes your eyes very tired. So when this happens, just go here to default shading and just go here to viewport background and change to gradient color. This is a little easier to see. Same here, default shading, viewport background, and go to something gradient color like this. So that gets you a little better viewport here. So let's say here, right now, if I put the sun a little higher, let's say like up here, this is almost like noon, right? Or maybe like 1 o'clock. Let's go here again. So now we have almost no shadow because the light is right above our scene. Is this making sense for you guys? How this works?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So I'm gonna lower the angles. I want to see some shadows in our scene. Okay. So let me find a better view here because I want to really get close to these shadows and see what's happening here. So let me just move the camera for 1 second here. Let's see, move it here. Control key. Let's see if I can close to here. That looks interesting. Let's render again. Okay, good. So we get some shadows here, right? Which is not bad. So the next thing, once we have the light set up, like anything in 3D Max, the sun, we can modify it, right? We can change, we can edit different things in the sun to either to adapt to our scene or just to make it look better. So let's say we pick the sun here. There's my sun. We go to properties. What properties do I have? A lot of things here, right? For us, the key properties are probably up here. Not so much those, but I use that much. And a few other things. Let's see here. What else do we have? Nothing really. Yes, I think our key things are just over here, which defines, the first thing here says enabled. So here we can actually turn off the sun. And first of all, when the sun looks yellow like this, that means it's on. When I click on the sun and I uncheck enabled, it now looks black. So now we know that it's off. Next, the second tab here we have is called intensity. So by default, the sun is always 1. 1 is the default. And for the most time, 1 works great. But sometimes you might need a little bit more light, or less, as you can go here and, make 2 to make it double the intensity, So that could always, so let's say if I make it here, 5, right? So now the sun is 5 times stronger. When I go to render, it will look overexposed because now, we just broke the exposure model. And now this is something, this is an exemption for this. So in that case, everything looks bad again. So, in that case, we can go back to, 1, those things. The next tab here is called size multiplier. So size multiplier here controls the quality of the shadows, right? So 1 is, again, default setting. If you go less, the shadows become more precise and more sharp. As you go bigger, they become more blurry. So let's say right now, let's take a sample here. Let's render here. Okay. Look at the shadow here, right? Very nice, sharp lines, looking through here. So let's take a rendering and see how this would change. So in this case, another good thing to know here is sometimes, I want to do a very focused rendering. Like I only care about this part here. I don't care about this up here. So I don't want to waste time. So what you can do here is, you see this little here, it looks like a gray box with a little blue box inside. That's your region. So if I click on region, I can select here exactly which part I want to render, like here. So I'm going to focus on this area. That means it's going to render much quicker and you don't have to waste seeing things. So I typically, go around doing small regions. And when I'm happy with everything, I'll do, the whole shot. So let's do this one here. So, but let's make a change to the sun first. Let's change the size multiplier to 3. There. And see if you can spot any change in this model. All right, do you see a change? Maybe not so much there. You will notice that what I actually changed here. 1 second. Oops. Here. You see the sun here, this circle here? If I go back to what it used to be, which is 1, see how it gets smaller? So you can tell visually if you modify this area by the size of this multiplier. So make it 10. Now this thing became really, really big here. And see how that changed the quality of my shadows. You see a difference in the shadows?
Yep.
Yeah, so again, with shadows, right, there's no wrong or right, right? Shadows are something that make something look realistic. But again, it's something abstract. No one's going to say your shadow's wrong, right? There's no way to, point it out. So in the end, your shadow becomes kind of something artistic that you guys can define, right? But make it 30, which is, much bigger. It's just, do you want the shadow a little sharper you want it a little blurrier, you know, you can use the default settings, or sometimes you want to fine tune those settings, right? Here, the setting is 30. At 30, then yes, the shadow's starting to look weird because we're losing, you know, definition. It's really blurry, right? And then if you go the other way, let's say our default setting for shadows is 1, right? Let's say I make it 0.1. So again, if you go below 1, that means everything's more precise, everything is sharper. So now we have a very sharp line here. Everything's well defined here. Again, nothing wrong. You know, in real life, you know, when the shadow is very close to the subject, it's very sharp. As the shadow gets longer and longer, it becomes more blurry. That's just, you know, the way shadows work. So again, to me, let's say I might use, let's say, a setting of maybe 2. I don't like to go too extreme, but you know, I do like to see the shadow sharp next to the subject and getting a little blurrier as they go further out. And sometimes you can go 1.5. You know, there's really no like, you know, for a tutorial, I can't say, you know, you have to use 1.7. You know, there's no such thing. Everything in 3D Max relies on you defining what you think looks realistic, right? So again, we'll cover, you know, the settings. You know, this is how you achieve this, but in the end, you decide, you know, what your eyes see as being, you know, good, right? All right, so that defines, you know, the quality of the shadow, right? That's the size multiplier. The filter color rate, what do you think that does? So the filter color, again, so if we see white, you know, white is more like something neutral, right? We're not adding anything to the scene. But sometimes maybe you want to enhance something. I don't know, maybe you want the sunset to look redder or to look more orange. So you could go here and let's say I'm going to add a filter that is orange like this, right? So now this filter is being added over the sun. Let's go here and we render. You see now my light is now more orange, right, throughout here compared to before. So let's say I render here half. Let's do half a region, right? And let's put the sun back what it used to be, which is white. And render again. Say this is with the sun being neutral. This is with the sun with the finish, with the orange, right? So again, you can enhance the colors of the scene. You could also do it something completely that is, you know, let's say fake. You know, you could really go here and make it, I don't know, purple or something like that, like this. What is that going to go into do to my scene? It's going to make everything like this. Again, nothing wrong, right? You know, the thing is you have the options to create those settings. So let's put it back to white like this. And the next one is color mode, right? So this one, you know, there's just different modes for rendering. So let's do here filter, right? Oops, wrong scene. This is filter mode, you know, which means it's relying on the filter, you know, whether it's white or pink or red, you know, it relies on those settings. The next one here, called direct mode. Let's go here, see if anything happens. Oops, wrong one. It did change. The shadows are now more softer. Almost you can barely see them anymore. If you go to the next one, which is override. So, I mean, again, there's slight changes, you know, nothing too dramatic. I always like to keep it just to the filter mode. So I wouldn't, again, try it out, you know, but again, this works best. The other ones here is just, you know, kind of sky models, right? You see right now we have a PRG clear sky. You see, because you have a, you know, a clear sky, you can do overcast, right? So overcast is going to give the lighting more that grayish tone. Imagine it, you know, it's about to rain. See, overcast, you know, the background will change to kind of a overcast, which means that the sun's color will change because the sun is no longer, you know, just, you know, pointing directly at the building. is going through the clouds. So, you know, that can be used if you want to get a certain light quality. Otherwise, you know, you can keep it as PRG clear sky. And again, if you want, you can play with these settings. I just leave everything default. You know, the sky model is something simple. You know, I'm not gonna play with the, you know, the horizon offset. You know, let's see, this part I don't really touch. But one nice thing about the sun is that you can also create really nice clouds. So first of all, let me move the camera here. So actually, let's make another camera. You know, this way I have this camera facing here. So I'm gonna select the front of the camera, the back, and with like anything else, I can hold down the shift key and just drag it out, right? And we can do again copy and instance. For a camera, you know, what do you think is the best choice, copy or instance? I'll take a guess. What do you guys think? Are you guys there?
I say instance.
Why? Okay.
Remind me, I think instance mimics what was done in the last one, so you know you have the same parameters.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. That's a good point. So again, a camera really, it takes up no space in the, you know, let's say in the hard drive, right? A model like this, you know, depending on the complexity, you know, it could be 1 megabyte, it could be 20 megabytes. A camera doesn't. So the problem if you do if we do a copy, right, like this, you know, and let's say we do instance, right? If I decide to go to this camera and change the lens type, then this is also going to change. And sometimes with cameras, you want to have different lenses, right? So for cameras, you know, I would say, because we don't have like too many, and because the cameras don't really, they don't really take up any space in your, you know, computer, I would do as copy, because, you know, if the time comes that you have to change, you know, the lens in a camera, if you do one here and you have 20 cameras, then that means they all just change and you lost, you know, the exact position of all those cameras. So in this case, I'll do copy. And now that I, you know, I have a second camera, I can go here under physical camera and just change this to physical camera number 2. And I want to point this camera because I want to see more sky. So let's go here to this shot. Let's make it a little lower. This, I'm going to take this part here and point it up, so we can see more of the sky. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Okay, let's take a shot like this. All right, so nice looking shot, you know. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Professor, you were saying, so it's better to do a copy with the camera as
With the
opposed
camera, yes, I definitely would do copy as a camera. Only because, you know, the cameras, you know, don't add any space to the file, and because you know, sometimes when you set up the cameras, you do want to change the lens type. You know, it could be from 24 to 35, or you know, any number, and that just makes it a, you know, more control. It gives you more control for these shots.
Okay.
All right, so we see in this scene here, first of all, we have the default V-Ray sky, which is simply a clear sky, right? We have again, this line here just signifies the horizon line, and the brown area here, it just mimics a ground, right? There's nothing there, you know, this is just a background image. It's just for us to be able to visualize where the horizon line lies in our scene. But another good thing about the V-Ray sun, and this only works in Max 2023. If you have the previous ones, it didn't have this option. So let's say I click on the sun. Right? Let's go here, and you see here under clouds, right? Right now, I'm gonna put clouds on. And this is gonna create volumetric clouds. That means they're actual 3-dimensional clouds. And the nice thing is these clouds actually react with the sun. So if the sun is behind the clouds, they're gonna cast shadows. So let's see here. So I put just clouds on, and let's see what it looks like without making any modifications. All right, so the sun is definitely behind here. We can see that. You see that clouds are kind of illuminated from behind the sun. And now that we have also you see how they give a very nice sense of space because they get smaller, you know, as they go further back into the background. You see also here that, you know, it is taking longer to render because we're adding more complexity to the scene, only because these clouds are not an image in the background. They're physical clouds. That means they are able to cast shadows and interact, which, you know, adds to the time here. But let's see how we can modify them. So to click on the cloud, and what things do we have? So do you want the clouds to cast shadows? Yes. Any benefits? You know, shadows look good. Any side effects? Shadows tend to cause things to, you know, take longer to render. But right now, okay, let's leave it on density, right? So we have density, variety, cirrus amount, height. That means the height in the sky, the cloud thickness. So okay, so let's look here. So density. Default setting is 0.5. Let's make it 2. See what? No, sorry. The most you can do is 1. So, you know, I went from 0.5 to 1, so we should have doubled the density. Let's see what happens. Yes, so more clouds, right? Now we can start to achieve almost like a cloudy effect in our scene. The sun now is kind of hidden behind the clouds, so it is working correctly. You know, now we have almost no shadows here because it's being blocked by the sun, by the clouds. Okay, so let's close that. Let's go back again. Let's leave it as, let's try 0.6 here. And for the variety, again, we can go from, you know, 0 to 1. Right now it's 0.3 by default setting. Let's make it 1. See what happens. So that's the great, you know, variety or more clouds. Here, not bad. Next thing here, let's just skip down to so cirrus amount right now is 0.2. Let's try 0.7. I always try to, like, you know, exaggerate it. This way we can see a clear change here. So do you see the difference there? What did I just add? So let's see here. So again, this is why I kind of like working in Zoom, because I can easily annotate, which is a pain if I'm teaching in school. But you see these clouds over here, right? These are the ones that are controlled by the cirrus amount. Then we have the thickness, right? The thickness will control where the clouds are. Right now, this cloud is like this, right, in shape. If you make it thicker, it's gonna make it much bigger, right? It's gonna control almost the cloud, you know, puffiness and those things. And the height here, this one here, is how they're, you know, located in the sky. You know, the height of the let's see, on the atmosphere. All right, so let's now modify here. Let's modify here. Let's try the thickness. Let's make it the default setting is 500. Let's make it 1000 and see how this looks. You see, it's just gonna stretch them up. And at this point, you know, you think they're looking now realistic, the clouds, or they're looking kind of fake? What do you think by looking at the clouds? How did they look?
I think they look a little bit more realistic.
Oh, yeah? Oh,
Yeah,
good.
with the lighting.
Okay. To me, I don't know why they look a little fake, but again, clouds is very abstract, right? It's like, you know, again, you really cannot go wrong with clouds because they're always different. So yeah, so I mean, you can make it, let's say, like this, you know, thicker. And what's the other setting that we have? We have also the setting of the height. Again, by default now it's set to 1000. Let's say I make it 5000. Can I go that far? Yes, I can go 5000. And let's see what changed. All right, so now they're kind of definitely higher in the atmosphere. Looks a little bit, you know, too many little, look more like little marshmallows. So again, this, it's kind of, you have to kind of work it out. You know, right now it looks a little strange, but the good thing is you have, you know, the options to make this, you know. So let's say I leave this as 1000. you know, maybe this, I'll leave it, I'll put it 600 for the thickness. I do like the cirrus amount because those are the secondary clouds in the sky. They are low clouds and they are higher clouds, right? The variety, I'm gonna make it as, it used to be 0.5, let's make it 0.7. Density, yeah, I'll leave it, let's try 0.4. And let's see how this looks. All right, so now we kind of lost. So again, density definitely is important. You see how we have a nice shadow here? You just gotta be careful, you know, if you put too many clouds, then that shadow might be blocked by the sun. So if I go here to density, and let's put it back to 0.7. Now it's completely blocking my shadow. So there's good things here. So again, we're gonna do sky eventually two different ways. The first way is like this, which is a physical sky controlled by 3D Max. The negative thing about the sky is that you really cannot control where the clouds are placed. So like right now, this cloud is blocking my shadows here. You know, you can play with the numbers here, but you cannot just randomly guessing at those things. The second sky that we'll try eventually is a sky based on an image. So we'll use a physical image of a sky, right, that we can apply to an object. And then because it's an image, it's not going to cast any shadows, and we can visualize where the clouds are because we can see the image mapped to an object. And again, both actually work really good. You know, I use kind of both of them all the time, but the good thing is, you know, to have options, right? When do you want to use a 2D image material as a sky, or when do you want to use the 3D Max, you know, sky volumes that we have here? And you see, it's still rendering even after I was talking here. So this is going to take about roughly about 2 minutes to render. And let it finish here, and then you get the exact time frame. Almost done. So when it's done, you can check back down here, and that will give you the rendering time. So that one took 1 minute and 25 seconds, which doesn't seem like too long right now because our scene is so simple. But once you start adding complexity to the scene, eventually, like, you know, having glass, maybe water, then it will add more time to the scene. All right, so for now, again, we could also, you know, if you want to get shadows, we could try here. Okay, let's try 0.6, right? And let's do a quick region over here so I can see what's happening. Nothing there yet. Okay, let's try, and this is where, you know, a lot of time spent in 3D Max is just doing testing. Let's try 0.5. So there's still a cloud that's blocking my view somewhere there. There is, I mean, you could here, you know, go here on the Y and the X and kind of move the clouds left and right. It's, you know, it's not really, it's hard to do, I guess. Let's try 0.45. All right, so there we got, you know, some shadows there. So now that I get that I like, let's go back and do the entire sky again. Okay, so we have, you know, and again, this large kind of white area, that's my sun. Which, you know, right now it doesn't look that good because, you know, it's overexposed. We could make the sun be less strong, right? So if I click on the sun here, let's say we make it intensity, I don't know, 0.5, just do 0.5 and see what it looks like. We see now more right here of the sky, but again, we lose quality on the shadow here. So again, it's a kind of, it's, you know, you're moving forward and backwards all the time, you know, testing out here, checking here, you know, and you do a lot of testing in 3D Max because, you know, the only way to see your options is to render again. So, you know, a lot of the time is spent, as long as you guys know where to go to achieve your options, that's the key thing, because afterwards, you're gonna be just, you know, rendering, you know, a lot of things until you're happy with the results that you see here. So right now, you know, the sun became half, you know, the intensity. So yeah, we can try that. We can also try, you know, for now, I'm gonna keep it at 1 because I want to use it eventually. So we'll keep it at 1. And again, this, just gonna play with it, with the sun to get the numbers you want to, achieve here. Okay. All right, up to this point, guys, any comments? Any questions?
Yeah, did you send that paper for the V-Ray?
Oh, not yet. I'm gonna do it after class. Yeah, I forgot. Let me 1 second. Actually, I can do it right now. I just have it ready here.
Okay.
V-Ray. 1 second. I'm just gonna copy it. One second. Okay, I'm gonna drop it into your folder for 3047.2. Student work. Okay, you can check now. It'll be on the main folder for student work, right? It's called V-Ray account. So you should be able to use it now.
Where did you post it?
Just on your student folder. Where you have
In Dropbox?
syllabus. Yeah, Dropbox, yes, Dropbox.
Okay.
Okay. All right, guys. So
Professor,
again,
can you share the Dropbox?
I did.
Professor, yeah, no, I did not get access to it. Can you drop on the chat or send to my email?
Yeah, I don't remember getting access to Dropbox as well.
Really?
Yeah.
I sent to all the emails I had on the CUNY First account.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Can you go right
I-
now and can you please drop your emails on the chat right now?
No,
But
I've gotten your other emails, but I
You
just
have really? Okay.
yeah, I don't have because I'm looking right now on my emails. I don't see anything about like a Dropbox.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay, so can you please just after class send me an email and I'll redo it again. Same thing with the other person. So this way, I'll know to go there and send you a new invite.
Thank you.
All right. Same thing. Hi,
Okay,
I have to
thank
hear,
you,
but
Professor.
also send me an email just because I need a reminder. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that Dropbox has the syllabus, so pretty much it has this here. So this is the one you guys are sharing. So it has the syllabus, weekly rendering. So you see from here, I made folders for every week. So since today we're learning about how to render, that means next week on the 15th, then you're gonna be submitting your first renderings. And if you go on each folder, it's already a folder for your name, right? Where you can just go in there and drop your work. There's also a folder for the final portfolio eventually, the assets. I'll be giving you guys stuff here as we go through the class. There's a link here for the YouTube channel, and here's the V-Ray account information. So everything should be there for you guys to use. Again, just be careful here that you don't delete stuff because it is shared by the entire class. All right, so I think we're getting close to my lecture. Again, I don't like to lecture, more than an hour and a half because it gets complex for 3D Max, and again start to lose the the students' attention. But we'll finish soon because I always lecture and then you guys can take a break, of course, and then do everything in class. But since we're Zoom, we'll finish and you guys can finish there and get to work on this. But let's just define the next thing here. So every class, for every weekly rendering, I want you guys to create 5 renderings, 5 different ones, which means that we're going to create 5 different cameras. So right now I have 2 here. So let's now make it more organized. So let's click on this camera here. And I'm going to change the name just because, this is a weird name, and just call it, for now, to make it simple, I'm going to call it view 1. I'm going to click on this one. We'll call it view 2, right? And let's copy this camera a few more times. So I'm gonna say copy. Oops. I'm gonna say copy 1 here, right? Copy. Let's copy. So copy 2 more. So there's our 5 cameras. So now, what am I doing with these cameras? Ideally, capture whatever you did in class today. Like we made the shape. We made the shape here, right? So this is camera number 3. We'll put it here. This could be, I don't know, a cool shot like that, for example. Let's look at the next camera. Camera 4. Make camera 4. Actually, I'm gonna put it inside the space here because like inside the cage, that could be interesting. And then we have the last camera, which is camera number 5. Okay, captures kind of this stuff here. Let's go from here. And again, right now, just try to capture everything you did in class, all the work was accomplished. And this one, I might raise the front of the camera a little higher. Like this. So there's my 5 shot, right? So unfortunately, you can't render everything at the same time. You have to go one by one. So once you have your 5 shots already defined, right? The next thing is to capture them. So you see here, the render button, right? So let's go again, render, right? Oops, wrong view. Okay. All right, there's my view. Look, actually looks pretty cool with the clouds. All right, so we captured this view. Next things, we have to save it, right? So we have here the save button, same icon as any other place. Click save. It's gonna ask you, again, like anything, folder location. In this case, save it, in that Dropbox folder. All right, so you're gonna go to your Dropbox here. You're gonna go to weekly renderings, next week's folder, which is the 15th. Find your name here. Let's say we go here to Felix, and just drop it here, and you're gonna save this as a JPEG file. So again, give it a name, and for the name, make it simple. Use your your first name, underscore the date. That's it. And then for the format, use JPEG. So JPEG file. Right. Let's say here. Let's say I do here. I don't know, call it test rendering JPEG, and do save. The first time you render, they're gonna give you this little control here, and by default, it might be kind of here. But just move the bar all the way to best. So you have the best possible rendering. Okay, and you're done. And then you hit render. Then you hit save. You have your first shot. Then again, you have to go back here, go back and switch to the next view, render again, and then save it again. And that's it. So make sure you have those shots next week. And again, these shots eventually, all of these shots that we do every week, they're going to eventually go into your portfolio, right? And for me, for us, it's important you guys actually get them done every week, because from these shots, I can see if you guys are falling behind. I can see if you need extra help. For example, if I see that class are wrong, if I see that you're not getting any shadows, then together as a class, we can work together to make sure that everyone's at the same level, working in this. So it is important to see that you are getting the skills that I'm trying to teach in each class, through making these 5 renderings every class. Again, at this point, these renderings shouldn't take a long time. They might take 2 minutes per rendering. So that's like, let's say 10 minutes of waiting for the computer to work. Important with this, is you have to do a bit of, experimenting. So when you're rendering, try to capture, one with the clouds very, dense, one with the clouds less dense. One could be with the sun very low on the horizon. One could be with the sun higher. So you capturing all these very simple atmospheres. Again, also play around with, making the sun brighter, play around with the shadows, making them, more blurry, more sharp. So the idea of these 5 shots is also to capture those things that we're kind of, experimenting in class. And then, of course, I want you guys to also try everything I did, like this, of course, your shapes don't have to look identical to mine. That's impossible. But try to create something similar, and start with something like this, then break it up into, by applying smooth, then break it up again by applying mesh smooth that we have here. Then try the lattice modifier, and then try it again with a different shape, so see, and then, use your cameras to capture all those things that we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
In the beginning, you had said, if you use the command F3, it turns it into a grid.
Yes. No, F3 is the wireframe. Yes.
Yeah. So how do you change it back?
Press again F3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the key ones are F3 is wireframe. If you press it back again, it goes back to before. And then F4 highlights the geometry. So you see how we can see the lines by doing F4 on and off. So that's a
Yeah.
good thing to use here. Actually, since right now I have you guys here, I'm going to just send a quick invite since a couple of you guys posted your email. So let me share this. So again, Heido, let me send it again. And let me copy also Anthony. And if I don't see your email here, then just send me a email to my address, and I'll add it there. Let me send you also a link, Anthony, for this. Okay, that's it. All right, next thing before you guys, so I think we'll finish here the class. This is already enough for today. I don't want to overload you guys with this stuff, but practice, and let me do a quick attendance check. So I have right now Numa. No, so Jairo, you're here, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Antonio, sorry.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I'm sorry I pronounced your name wrong. Luce? Henry. No. Caroline. Tylee.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Carlos. And Alejandro. Okay. Lucy, okay, you're here. So okay, let me mark you. And I see also
Professor-
Numan, you put an email. Okay. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, yeah. What were you saying? Okay, so I think, again, I'll post just the video will download in a bit. I'll post it in a few hours, the video, and just start to work on those things for the class. So I think for today, I think that's good for today's class, and make sure to practice a lot. Any comments or any questions you guys might have right now? Or you guys okay?
We're
No,
okay.
we're good. Thank you,
good?
Professor. Just
All right, guys. Yeah, go
need to
ahead.
install the V-Ray thing and that's
Yeah,
it.
try that.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying
as
that
soon
I
as
need-
possible. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll
perfect.
do it right now.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. I'll post the video. It should be
Thank-
up in a very soon. And then if you fall behind, just take a look at it again. And I'll see you guys in the next class.
All right. Thank you, Professor.
All right,
See you.
guys. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great